Welcome to B2B Commerce Corner. Commerce Corner is a sub-series of the E-Commerce Edge podcast discussing all things B2B commerce through the lens of agencies, consultants, merchants, and more. Enjoy. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the E-Commerce Edge podcast. It is my absolute pleasure to welcome our latest incredible guest to the pod, Mr. Dmitry Khan from Access Solutions. Welcome, Dmitry.
Hey, it's great to be here.
It's lovely to have you along for the ride with me today. And look, I've been following you for a while now on LinkedIn. We've been connected for a while on LinkedIn. Love a lot of your content that you put out. I think if I think back to the very, very first post that caught my attention, I'm pretty sure it was either about project management and the challenges of project management. There was another one that caught my attention about the vagaries and challenges of RFPs. And then you also did a post about some of the challenges of ERP with B2B commerce. I've been following you for a while now. We've had some good banter online. You and your agency, you're the founder and chief solutions architect within your agency, and you guys build primarily B2B solutions, but dabble a little bit in the B2C and D2C space, but you focus very heavily on B2B e-commerce solutions for your clients. I'm really looking forward to this chat today, but before we dig into the nitty-gritty of your background and how you do what you do over at Access, why don't you tell me how you came to be in this industry? Because if I look back across your industry, definitely very tech-heavy, have built and run agencies, have worked in not only the development side, but also in the digital marketing side. So you've got this pretty broad set of experience in our industry, but what drew you in the first place?
It's been a very interesting journey, and I was just carried with the flow of things over the years. I was a developer myself, but my very first job straight out of college, actually before I even graduated, I was put straight into the marketing department. So that really gave me an interesting exposure, understanding of who my actual customer is. And e-commerce, at least in the early days, I'm going back to 2008, 2007, not exactly the starting days, but compared to what is happening out there right now, that's almost like the ancient times. You would work with marketers most of the time. So that was very interesting exposure. It really helped me because once I started getting real, interesting, bigger projects, I could actually understand my customers a lot better. And over the years, as we've seen the e-commerce technologies mature, it was obvious that solutions like Shopify, they were really commoditizing the technology, the solution for B2C. So the shift was natural to start moving towards B2B, where complexity is more on the technology side, more on the customization of the integrations, on the behaviors specific to the customer, to the business model. And it just worked out very naturally, but also around 2022, we just looked up at the metrics that B2B dwarfs B2C just in the total addressable market size. And that was not a difficult decision.
What's interesting that you say that, because when I started my own independent consultancy just over 4 years ago, and in fact, we've been running our current businesses for a similar amount of time, you just slightly less than 4 years, me slightly more than 4 years. When I first started out, I was like, I could go and just be a generic sort of e-com consultant, and I could probably do a lot of business, and it felt like the opportunity was pretty big. But then I also thought, look, the most interesting projects in my 25-year career that I've ever been involved in have all been B2B projects. Those have been the most complex, the hairiest, the scariest, the most complex to architect, have the most complex integration architecture, have the most back-end systems to talk to and share data with. Multiple ERPs often are in play, CRMs are in play, PIMs can be in play, etc. And I thought, actually, when I look at the trajectory of B2B in terms of market growth and CAGR, it's like forecast to be like 8 to 10 times that of D2C and B2C until at least 2030. I also said, look, there's not that many of us out there that actually specialize in B2B and have a decent amount of experience in it. And so it felt like, geez, I could go into a very red ocean scenario where it's hard to differentiate by being just a generic e-com consultant, or I could really double down on my B2B experience and say, well, that's very much more blue ocean, a lot less competition, a lot more need out there, and this feels like a really strong opportunity. And it's worked out to be that way, but you can imagine my concern because it feels like when you niche down like that, it feels like you're giving up opportunity, not capitalizing on an opportunity, because it feels like you're effectively making the top of your funnel half of what it could be or a quarter of what it could be. But what you find, and I'd love your thoughts on this, what you find is that niching down is a superpower. And it helps to make your market positioning your message and your value prop so much more crystal clear that it helps to crystallize your ICP and help them better understand how you can help and serve them uniquely. And it was the best decision I could have ever made. The first 2 years, a little bit challenging. 2024 really started to boom, and 2025 is set, at least based on current trajectory, I'm probably going to do double the amount of business that I did in 2024. So certainly the right decision, but it took a little bit of time to start bearing some serious fruit and to have a pretty serious, solid pipeline. So did you experience something similar where you said, look, yes, if we focus on B2B, it's narrowing our funnel, but there's an upside to narrowing that funnel?
Yes, I'd say it's actually a massive addressable market, what we started with. And the size of those businesses that we are working with is bigger on average. Yes, there are really big, shiny objects in the form of those logos that we all know. And it's just so cool to say, I work with those guys. And any store you walk into, it's on the shelves of Targets and Walmarts. And it just makes you feel good. But the reality is, again, if you're thinking like a practical business person, I think it seems to be smaller, but it actually isn't. And one of the interesting advantages you and I share because of running the agencies in the past, or for me, continuing to run it right now, is we're small business owners. We understand the accounting. We understand the financial and operational aspects of running a business. Yes, agency versus B2B manufacturing or distribution is very different, but it's the advantage that most of the e-commerce practitioners coming from the marketing side of things, B2C side of things, they just lack that knowledge at all. But that's the language really that most of the B2B merchants tend to speak. And they really expect you to be coming into the conversation fully prepared. It was a very natural conversion for us. And I'd say we felt like the opportunity is actually, our funnel has widened because there were so many different B2C brands that were not the right fit specifically for our skill set. All of a sudden, what used to feel like a little bit of a deficiency in the skill set, because you got to be a master of all trades and so many different things when you're doing B2C. You got to have a lot of depth in web analytics, in digital marketing, in social, in paid, in owned media. The list goes on, right? Here, you actually need to be good at a certain amount of things. And I wouldn't say it doesn't necessarily make it easier. It just allows you to be deeper and have actually deeper conversations with your customers. Because my experience also includes being a director of web dev in a marketing agency. And it was really not necessarily churn, but it was a lot of rinse and repeat, but we never had a chance to make a deep impact on those client businesses because you had to roll out those simple cookie cutter websites all the time. It's not the case. It's not how it works in B2B.
You've hit the nail on the head there. And when I was building and running agencies and we had a heavy cohort of B2C and D2C merchants we were working with, I would say greater than 90% of the time, our primary client was a marketer, right? And so they have very different goals in many instances than B2Bs. They have very different expectations. They oftentimes are not as technical as your typical B2B operator will be. They typically will not necessarily understand, oh, we want to move this here, or we want it to behave this way, or whatever. They will not necessarily be able to make a direct connection between this expectation of the customer experience and the technical requirements to deliver on that level of customer experience. Whereas I find that within the B2B world, I'm generally dealing with operators. I'm dealing with heads of sales. I'm dealing with heads of IT, CTOs, CIOs. I'm dealing with leadership, CEOs, head of RevOps. I'm dealing with operators in the business. And so they're probably a little bit less concerned with the nitty gritty look and feel and this button positioning and color. And it just needs to bloody well work. And a lot of times their requirements are tied back to the functionality of an ERP system as opposed to some sort of marketing plan or some sort of campaign or some sort of customer avatar or something like that. It is primarily, and I like to say in the B2B world, it's primarily function over form, where in the B2C and D2C world, it's almost always form over function. And so, yes, there are some sophisticated retailers that want and need both, but I would say that generally speaking, in the B2B world, the technical requirements and the functional requirements, they take center stage. And oftentimes it is about how can we augment and give sales reps and teams superpowers to be able to service their customers at a higher level, because almost all relationships in the B2B world are one-to-one personal relationships. That's just the way that they're wired. And for you guys, that probably lends itself to some of the technical and operational prowess that you guys have. It feels like a bit of a match made in heaven.
100%. It's not that UX does not matter in B2B. We're actually dealing with some of those interesting use cases where initially, even the stakeholders on the client side, being the operators, they exactly said that, hey, I want a functional website. This thing doesn't matter. And we try to coach them on things. They said, no, thank you. Now we're dealing with the afterthought solutions, the improving the website experience. It doesn't matter if your website is beautiful versus just it looks good. They actually, many of the B2B websites look very much the same. But my analogy is anywhere you go in the world, pickup trucks look much the same because they have the exact same function. And another analogy I love making in B2B space, Mercedes, I'm not sure if there are any Mercedes trucks in the US, but Volvo is a good example. So
Yes,
lots of
Volvo's a
Volvo
great one.
trucks on the roads, and there are also Volvo luxury vehicles on the road, and they're very different. And when we say a good Volvo truck versus a good Volvo SUV, the difference is very obvious, right? It's got to be functional, it's got to be reliable, it's got to be convenient from the operator perspective. And a truck is much more expensive than your luxury version of any Volvo that's a like executive sedan. So it's just different purpose built vehicles. Same is true for B2B versus B2C. It's also been interesting to see at the conferences I've been attending actively in the last year. AI has been coming up all the time. And people are afraid of AI. In B2B, it's also becoming a topic very frequently being discussed in the different panels. And this is exactly what I think you've mentioned: efficiency, operational efficiency. This is so much about the relationship. And the way the B2B merchants structure the relationship with an agency is almost the same the way they structure a relationship with their own customers. It's the reliability. It's, are you going to be there for me? You want to build that, and you want to enable them to do the exact same relationship with their customers. Don't have them deal with the spreadsheets. Don't have them pick up the calls or text message. I literally hear of people placing orders over the text message. The company has to take that order because that's a core customer. But it's a nonsense for everybody. It's inconvenient, as a matter of fact, for everybody. So that's where we see the most value, offering the functionality that's also meaningful and offers good user experience, just not in the conventional B2C sense of word.
Yeah, and I think you raise a really good point. I hear mostly, to be fair, from the B2C, D2C side of the fence, I hear this term called the consumerization of B2B, which is this expectation, or they like to say B2B customers now want the same type of experience they have through an Amazon or that they have through their favorite D2C website. And I've never been a proponent of even remotely comparing the two because the goals of those two types of buyers are completely different. And so, yes, they want it to be seamless. Yes, they want it to be easy. Yes, but even when they arrive at the site, their mindset is different. What they expect from the website is different. So, in the sense of seamless, easy, frictionless, yes, that is, but that's where I think the similarities kind of end. Because typically with the sales process on the B2B side of the business, there's a credit approval, there's a credit application and approval process, there's a creation of the account process, there's the creation of the account hierarchy. Okay, here's the company, but here's the users underneath that have to be created in our systems so that they are authorized to create purchases. Here's their credit limit. Here's their restricted or custom catalog that they have access to. Here's their custom pricing. Here's their custom MOQs. Basically, everything about those relationships is usually customized in some way. And as a result of that, you cannot treat every single B2B customer that enters your website in exactly the same way. By definition, you must personalize their experience because the way that they've engaged with you and even contractually the way that they've signed up with you is very different to the B2C or D2C world. Plus, when you look at the complexity of the typical product in the B2B world, it looks nothing like the B2C or D2C world. If I'm a standard consumer and I rock up at a website and it's a t-shirt website, I know what a t-shirt is and I have a pretty good understanding of that product, right? Apart from maybe the color, the size, and maybe the design, those are the only decisions I got to make. But in the B2B world, oftentimes product complexity, compliance, product attributes, how those get merchandised, how they become searchable through the front end for a specific application or use case. All this stuff starts to become orders of magnitude. When you start stacking it on top of each other, it becomes orders of magnitude more complex. So all the way from the merchandising to the search, the find, and then as you pointed out, even something as simple as adding products to your cart. Well, in the B2B world, I might have 100 lines in my cart versus in the B2C world, I might have 2 or 3, right? So being able to support CSV upload of an order or a PDF upload of an order or something like that to populate the cart, then I can easily check out. All these things add orders of magnitude of complexity to even when you start with discovery with one of these B2B suppliers. Discovery is a totally different beast than when I was doing discovery for a B2C or a D2C project, which is mostly how do you want to market your goods online? Whereas in the B2B world, it's like, how the frick do you sell your goods today? And how can we digitalize that process in a meaningful way? So even the conversation right from discovery forward is very different, isn't it?
100%. What I really like about everything you mentioned right now is the personalization. This is such a beaten up term and it's being used left and right. You nailed it in the sense that in B2B, people don't even realize they're personalizing experience when they do. And they do it like routinely all the time. The other great point was bulk add to cart through CSV files is built into a bunch of platforms. I think it was native to Magento for a long time. But in B2B, it's not just adding to the cart, because in the cart situation, you have to check the custom pricing. You have to check the availability of the product based on the warehouse they're assigned to, or maybe the product is restricted. It's some exclusivity private label thing going on. So you just can't build that out of the box. You can't just take a feature or install an app and it will work. So you have to go through that carefully. And the interesting part with the discovery is that in B2B space, people just think differently. In B2C, the operational side of things, the marketing side of things is somewhat similar. I don't want to bash on B2C. There's a lot of complexity there. It's just a different type of complexity. But requirements gathering process tends to be somewhat straightforward, as you pointed out. In B2B, the customers tend to be working on the same job for like sometimes 20 plus years. It's just natural to them. They fail to mention certain requirements because they consider them to be, it's a common sense. Why would you even ask or mention that? So you have to know what could be under the hood. You got to learn those lessons the hard way oftentimes. So my discoveries tend to run all the way through the launch of the project because client goes, oh my God, I just thought of one more thing. And you got to be prepared for that, even the way you run the project, so that this change request, you don't treat it as, oh my God, they're throwing a wrench in this well-oiled machine. No, it's expected to happen. So you are running and planning with a certain flexibility built into the process, or otherwise it's going to be nothing but frustration on both sides.
And how do you deal with Salesforce resistance? Because one of the biggest things when I'm first called in to work with a client that we have to address, it's what I call the elephant in the room, is that oftentimes sales teams are really resistant to anything that smacks of automation, anything that smacks of, oh, you're going to pick my pocket and take my commissions. Oh, you're going to replace us with the machines. AI's here to replace us all. There's definitely this elephant in the room that you have to overcome from day one. If the leadership hasn't been able to get the sales team on board, that's where you have to start, because you need everybody on the bus. Because I tell you, the one team that can scupper all your digitalization efforts is your sales team. If they're not on board, there's all kinds of subterfuge they can do to make sure that sales continue to go through them instead of any kind of new digital solution that you might have. So when you first go in, if they haven't done the groundwork or they don't even know how to do the groundwork with sales teams and have those difficult conversations, how do you approach that?
You got to win over the sales team and whoever other stakeholders are, 100%. I've never seen any success trying to work around that. You're going to have a website, but it's not going to deliver any value. You're not going to have a case study. You're not going to have a referral, nothing like that. We tend to approach with the end game in mind. So first, you need to speak with stakeholders and what is your goal? What is your pain point? And walk backwards to say, this is the solution. And here's why. Because if you start with a solution, the solution looking for a problem, it's a very difficult sale. Once you start showing, hey, this tool does not replace you, it actually makes you more efficient. It makes your day shorter, less stressful. You actually can focus on your job. You can probably sell more. You can better the services for your customers. That's a much better discussion than just talking about the gadgets and widgets and the features, because nobody buys features. You're buying a solution to a problem. If the sales team does not have a problem, and often they do without realizing it, start from the other side. So approach the pain points, have them realize they're experiencing that pain. How can I help you? That's really the fundamental, I think, approach I try to with all of our clients is, how can I help you? What is your problem? Because if there is no problem, I'd rather walk away from this project. It's not going to help anybody. It's not going to help my reputation.
And I'd love your thoughts on, so I totally agree with you. And I think one of the approaches I take is for the B2B suppliers that track their sales reps' time or their CSR's time by activity, I get them to actually, like when I'm sitting there with them or virtually sitting there with them, can you please open up the CRM? Maybe it's Salesforce or whatever it is. They usually have some sort of CRM tool in the business, even if they don't do e-commerce, because they want to track lead to cash, right? And they want to track their pipeline, a sales pipeline, and they want to track things for commissions, etc. So they usually have some sort of system of record for tracking salesperson performance, whether that's sometimes that's only in a spreadsheet. So I get them to pull up that system of record. And then what we do is we look together at what amount of time a average sales rep or a average CSR spends on admin tasks that don't add any value to them, don't add any value to the customer, and don't add any extra commission to their back pocket in the process. And we find that anywhere from 20 to 60% of a sales rep's time is spent doing nothing tasks that they would lose absolutely nothing by automating away. It would actually make them, as you say, more efficient. It would actually give them more time to schmooze with customers. It would give them more time to go knock on more customers' doors. It would free them up to actually make more money. But until and unless they're actually looking at that and they're saying, yeah, actually, it's not a heck of a lot of fun when I go out and I meet with a customer and then I got to come back and key their order into the ERP. That's not a lot of fun. Or, I typically, from Joe, my customer, I receive an order a week as a PDF PO that then I have to download onto my desktop and I have to manually rub over that in the PDF and I have to copy and paste it into our ERP for fulfillment. Or I have to, when I get a quote, I've got to manually key that quote request into the ERP or into the CRM, or maybe both, because I've seen that too. I've seen both have to be keyed into both places. Then I have to send the information back to Joe. Then he's got to approve it, and he's got to attach the PO to it. Then he's got to send it back, and then I got to authorize everything in my system. It's just, oh my Lord. And then we have the scenario where a lot of tribal and institutional knowledge lives in these sales reps' heads, and they don't even necessarily realize it as such. And they don't necessarily even recognize the risk to the business of having stuff only in their heads. And that becomes very much a one-to-one piece of data. We need to turn that one-to-one data into one-to-many data by getting it digitalized and getting it into the system in a meaningful way. But until you point that out to them and you say, look, Bob or Jane, the sales reps here, they're, 2-3 years from retirement? What happens if they retire? Or what happens if they go to one of your competitors? Or what happens if they get hit by a bus tomorrow, God forbid? What's going to happen with all that institutional and tribal knowledge they've built up over the last 30 years that only they know where on the shelf behind them to go and get that print catalog and copy a page or scan a page out of it? Or they only know where on the network drive to find this piece of information about this esoteric pump specification. Or they know that on their desktop, they've got 5 or 6 spreadsheets with the 5 or 6 price lists for their named accounts that they maintain, they update with custom macros, but they only know, they're the only ones in the business that know how to create those custom macros. They are the only ones that know how to do those pricing updates for their customers. This is really risky stuff, not only for them, but also for the businesses they're employed by. And oftentimes those risks are not even known risks. And so just pointing that out can sometimes unlock doors. What are your thoughts?
I see that, and I see that actually from multiple perspectives. Retirement or failure to fill in qualified, strong labor, because everybody's looking for good, strong people with industry knowledge, and losing just one of your respected, well-tenured salespeople, it's scary. Being able to do more with less is very critical, very important. Even if you're not intending to cut your workforce, which I don't think I've ever heard from any B2B owner, the intention is like, how do I protect my business? How do I protect the remaining team from being overburdened, overloaded if somebody is just not here anymore, whether they change jobs, retire, or God forbid something happens to them? The other part is that marketability of the businesses, because we're seeing the consolidation of the market. And I've spoken to a number of PE analysts and investors, and they're saying the exact same thing. If the business is basically the owner is the business, and same could be said about the critical functions in their departments, I'm not even going to work on it. It could have positive cash flow. It could be a very interesting and very promising business, but it's so difficult to sell. It's going to be such an uphill battle to convince the buyer. So if you're looking for an exit strategy and you're in this B2B segment, you want to automate as much as possible. Then it's a much easier go-to-market. we're literally seeing businesses that were digitized in the form that was applicable to the mid 1990s. And that was a great move, and it was sufficient given the pace at which B2B moves to sustain itself for a good 25, 30 years. It was a good ride. 25, 30 years is a lot of time if you think about it. Somebody who was early on the upward swing in their careers back in the day is about to retire now. And if that person stayed with the business for all of that 30 years, it's incredible how much knowledge they got. We're hearing of accountants or ex-CFOs that are on retainer. And literally the quote from the customer is, we may hear from them tomorrow or we may hear from them in 2 months, depending on how they feel about it. But you can't really force that person back into the workforce and they are not really interested. And the critical business function is contingent upon that institutional knowledge. So it is scary. And pointing that out, I'd be probably speaking to C-level people about this, but pointing that out actually does increase their awareness.
Oh, it definitely does. Now, if we start thinking about tech for just a minute, we change gears a little bit and we start thinking about the tech. The amount of technology progress that has been made just in the last 24 months alone, specifically tech that is targeted exclusively or almost exclusively at the B2B world, even for somebody like me that's been in the business for 25 years now and you well over 20 years as well, the reality is that historically, even going back, say, 5 years ago, finding really good fit technology for B2Bs that didn't cost the earth was almost impossible. Like really heavy duty, proper B2B commerce platforms that were targeted at B2Bs and built from the ground up for B2B use cases, they were either non-existent or where you found them, they were super expensive. We're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars a year just for licensing. Now, what we're seeing is a proliferation to where now there's probably 30, 35 major B2B focused or solely B2B platforms out there. And then, of course, you've got all the major B2C and D2C platforms trying to retrofit B2B functionality and plug it into their platforms because they see what the growth opportunity in B2B is versus B2C and D2C. And they're seeding the B2C and D2C market mostly to Shopify, really. They've seeded that market and they're going, okay, where's the opportunity next? Okay, it's B2B. And that is hard for the vendors, but it's a great time. It's a great time to be a manufacturer or distributor because you have more choice than ever before to leverage technology that is built just for you versus trying to retrofit something that was not designed for your type of business. So give us your thoughts on where technology is, where it's come from, and where you think it's headed.
I think things have gotten a lot more convenient and affordable, and that's great. Now, because of the way B2B is structured operationally, it will never be out of the box. I think certain platforms are making really good progress creating some kind of no-code solutions. The easiest analogy to compare to would be Shopify flows, but it cannot just address every single use case, especially if we're talking about your conditional logic has to be built upon custom data field that did not exist in the platform by itself. It gets interesting. You pointed out early in this conversation that stakeholders in B2B tend to reproduce the ERP functionality online. This thought has crossed my head more than once, even in the past couple of weeks, basically creating a commerce type of solution, basically an agnostic headless extension of ERP platforms, an abstraction layer. And I know that people have actually tried to do that several times, and I'm sure there is a platform out there that does exactly that. In B2B commerce, really, most of the cost and complexity probably is not e-commerce per se. It's the tip of the iceberg, so it's visible, and it's certainly far more affordable. Because the problem, you're probably alluding to the Magento and Demandware days, like 10 years ago, you'd have to spend at least $250,000 just to customize your Magento on top of the licensing fees to make it a solid B2B solution. That's gone. And that's great. That's great because you can put that money towards upgrading your back office systems. And you can't deny it. B2B businesses will run out of back office. And the website is really just a by proxy display of what's in the ERP. I certainly like what's happening from a B2B commerce perspective. It's a great enablement tool that is a lot more friendly for a lot of merchants. It's a lot less scary. But the same thing is starting to happen in the ERP space as well. I think ERPs are becoming more affordable and more prepared, and they're better fit for online integrations. We're also seeing platforms that are neither ERP nor just your basic QuickBooks. They're starting to fill the void in the middle that existed for many years, and they're affordable enough. Guys like you and I, we can actually come and consult our customers who are like, you're at that stage, you've outgrown your QuickBooks, but ERP is too complex, too costly, and you're only going to use 10 or 20% of that. Here's another platform. So that is beautiful because that, again, enables us to help those businesses in the current economic environment. Honestly, they need a lot of help.
They sure do. And I think to your point, there's a lot of technologies that have been really hit the mainstream over the last just couple, 2-3 years that effectively are extensions of the ERP, whether we're talking SonaCommerce and the ERPs that they don't even have really their own product database. They're pulling everything directly real-time live from the ERP in the back end that they connect to Corvist, which is a very famous front end for SAP. So that way you don't have to take on SAP Commerce Cloud. You can plug in there, and Corvist only works. It's just a front end for SAP. It doesn't work with any other ERP backend. Mikkel Lintar, that I've had on the podcast before, he created Store Connect as the e-commerce front end, for Salesforce. So to your point, I think that there are, and that way you don't have to pay for and buy Salesforce Commerce Cloud. You can buy a much cheaper e-commerce front end engine that was designed only and basically bespoke, built from the ground up to be a commerce front end for Salesforce. And to your point, I think there are a lot of platforms out there today that have recognized that ERP for B2B is the beating heart of the business, and they need to have these seamless native integrations with their ERP, whether that be mediated by an iPaaS system or as an app or extension of that existing ERP or some other way of basically bringing native commerce technology to that underlying ERP system. It is just a must have, right? So totally agree with you. What do you think about the, if not new, then relatively recent crop of ground up B2B e-commerce platforms that are modular in nature? In many cases, they've got PIM out of the box as part of the commerce stack, and just a module you turn on. They've got CPQ, they've got order management, they've got all the back order management, they've got multi-location inventory management, they've got all that stuff out of the box that's needed really by default in most B2B environments. And so there are much more, to your point, they basically take and pick up where the ERP leaves off, right? And so they can plug a lot of those gaps without needing to go out and buy a separate PIM, a separate CPQ, and then system integrate it all through an iPaaS. These next generation B2B e-commerce platforms, it seems like a lot of them are realizing we need to be a more complete suite-based solution than just an online catalog system. We need to do a lot more than that. And it feels like this new crop of technology is pretty damn good. Whether we're talking Better Commerce, Oro, Znode, just think of, there's 10 I can rattle off the top of my head that have really either come into being in the last 5 years or have been seriously re-engineered within the last 5 years to where they cover many more B2B use cases than they did even just a couple of years ago.
I got to get my hands on some of those platforms. Oro that you mentioned, they've been around for quite some time, and they're more enterprise upmarket. So it's a little bit of a niche solution, but they're a great solution. All I can tell is they're good. This is definitely the new wave, and we can all see it coming. There's no other way around it, right? Everything is becoming not necessarily commoditized, but nobody wants to really orchestrate a big suite of services, build the custom connectors. You're definitely winning a lot by customizing within the same platform. It just reduces the amount of complexity. Also, as an engineer, I hate integration points. Every integration point has two ends to it, and each one of them can fail. So to me, it's just an extra point of failure, two for every single integration. I hate integrations for that very reason. As an agency, of course, we love them, right? It generates the work, it generates the hours, but I want stable, good, well-functioning, reliable websites for our customers. And not just the websites, the entire ecosystem, all of that data flow has to be seamless. I don't want to be woken up at night on the weekend because something's broken. So this is the way of the future, 100%. I'm all treating the B2C as a very watered down version of B2B. So whatever you build there for B2B, you can continue reselling that as a baseline package for your B2C if you have a good product. So 100% this is going to be happening. And some of those integrations, connectors, I think they're going to be much more also, you can build them a lot quicker simply because with the advent of an AI, those APIs, they're openly documented out there. So creating more of those plugin API integration connectors is going to be pretty quick. So I think whoever builds this flexible architecture is going to be the winner. It's going to take a few years because you got to have the marketing and people got to be aware of your brand. But eventually, this is, I think, the next wave of e-commerce, 100%.
Yeah, I love it. Now, what are your thoughts on other digital channels for B2B that oftentimes B2Bs don't necessarily even know are required to unlock new sales channels for them? And I'll give you two examples. So EDI has been around for a long time, but whale customers in the B2B world, they almost universally want to connect to you via EDI. Yet other customers want to connect to you via e-procurement or punch-out system because they've got an e-procurement module in their ERP, or they're running a Jagger or a Coupa or an Ariba, or they're running some kind of dedicated e-procurement system that makes them tremendously more efficient on the buy side. But if you are not offering that connectivity to them, you will not be able to sell to them. So famously, there's a whole lot of distributors out there, the biggest distributors, that basically they tell all the manufacturing partners that they work with, they'll give them an integration spec and they'll say, this is our integration spec. If you cannot connect to our punch-out / e-procurement system, you cannot sell to us. It's that simple. And conversely, the distributor, their B2B buyers oftentimes will say the same thing. Unless you can connect to our e-procurement system, we won't buy from you. And so by default, out of the box, we have more digital channels to sell through in the B2B world, because in the B2C and D2C world, there's a self-service e-commerce website. That is the primary digital channel. Sure, there's marketplaces and there's maybe social selling. And so we do have other channels, but the primary direct sales channel for most of these businesses is a self-service e-commerce website of some variety, right? In the B2B world, we got self-service e-commerce, we got punch-out, we have EDI, then we have the effort now to automate all of the traditional sales channels like email, WhatsApp, Teams, Slack, etc., where a lot of business gets done today, where I'm going to attach a PDF to a message that I send via WhatsApp to my sales rep, and I want them to key that in for me, right? So we have this world on the B2B side of the fence where there is a tremendous growth, an explosion in the B2B digital channels that need to be supported. And a lot of these businesses, they will never be in the running to supply governments, to supply at scale industrial buyers, to tender for new opportunities to become a preferred supplier to either a distributor or an end B2B buyer that's using it, say, on a building site or whatever. They will never even be able to have a chance at winning that business unless they can support these other digital channels other than e-commerce self-service. And so oftentimes when you explain this to them and you say, do you have any government business today? Do you have any heavy-duty commercial supply opportunities that are being opened up to you? No, because we don't even know what that would look like to service those opportunities. And when you start talking to them about relatively low lift. Yes, there's a lift, but it's a relatively low lift to unlock all of these new potential sales channels for them. Their eyes light up and they go, oh, and you can also help connect us to Amazon Vendor Central so that we're effectively a 1P B2B seller through Amazon. Oh my God, didn't even know we could do that. So sometimes when you have these conversations, do their eyes light up and go, wow, we didn't even know this was possible?
E-commerce is basically like a little thread that you start pulling on and so much gets uncovered. You're spot on. It's just a tool to get you from point A to point B, but that journey could be very long. And as you start packing up for the journey, you're finding out so many more new opportunities. And that I love our jobs for, because we actually start digging up their business needs and potential. You're sometimes they don't have the funding to go all in, but approaching this like a construction project, if you're building a custom home, make sure that you clear the lot, you properly do everything. And okay, I don't have the funds to build a garage here or a guest house extension or something like that, but this land is reserved exactly for this purpose. You have this conversation today, you start building 2 years later. And we see a lot of that. We actually go in saying, don't even try to start building for 2 to 5 year plan because it's going to drain your cash. You're going to burn a lot of cash for nothing because either the market changes, the technology changes, or your visibility into what you're trying to do will change. It will improve as we build this website, as you start exploring, especially true for the first timers. So many businesses don't have any website, or it's a very basic brochure, and you have nothing to compare against. You can start looking at your competitors. They're running their business differently. So it's not always a very helpful comparison. It does happen all the time. And yes, the eyes light up. And we literally had a project, for example, that started with a punch out system as a need and ended up being, well, for punch out, you need an e-commerce website. But as we started talking e-commerce, they realized they need an ERP. So we actually consulted them on the ERP selection and then tying all of those systems together. So it's really fascinating how seemingly small projects turn into big things with multi-year roadmaps. And it's just really interesting for me, both as a business analyst and an engineer.
I love it. I love it. Now, AI is a buzzword. The U.S. markets have taken a hammering over the last couple of weeks with potential pullbacks in AI spend by the hyperscalers and DeepSeek, which I like to call Deep Six because it Deep Six to the market for a little while when it first was announced by China. But the reality is AI is here to stay. It's not going away anytime soon. It's never going to be worse than it is today. It's only going to get better. But oftentimes I get B2B suppliers coming to me and saying, Jace, we're struggling to figure out how to leverage AI in our business. And then I come to find out you're not even doing e-commerce at all. You're not doing digital commerce at all today. We really need to take a crawl, walk, run approach to this thing here. Before you leap straight into the AI question, why don't we start talking about some of the other areas of your business that are ripe for automation, even without AI? Let's look at as you said, what are the pain points? What are the challenges that you are having? What are the challenges your customers are having in doing business with you? What are the things they hate or don't like about doing business with you? If you fix those 1, 2, or 3 things, it would be a no-brainer for them to continue to do business with you. Why don't we unpack that a little bit? What is your sense? What is your take? Boots on the ground. How are you leveraging AI as an agency first? And then secondarily, how are you seeing your customers wanting to leverage AI versus maybe what's available today in the mainstream technology stack?
As an agency, it really helps us become much more efficient. Also, part of my team is offshore, and even the communication gap has been so much, it's barely non existent because explaining complex concepts or just like the language barrier is basically gone. But that's from a really practical perspective. Business requirements, processing the call transcripts. I'm no longer taking the notes because it's
I
it's
know.
distracting me from the
How good is
conversation.
that? How freaking good is that?
Not just that, but the quality of the outcome, because then I speak to chatbot and ask if a particular question was covered and how exactly, and it gives me a much better quality of the notes than whatever I do briefly typing on the call. So that is better. Also, I have a recording to share with my team. It's a lot of small things. If we're not talking about AI as a product, building a whole new product startup, which I think everybody is dreaming of, but if we're talking small practical applications, none of that is groundbreaking. It's really almost like you got a very thorough, but also a very boring employee. If like people think of it as a little bit of a genie in the bottle, I make a wish and it happens. There's a lot of practical jokes around the genie in the bottle and like he misheard or misunderstood you. And that's exactly how AI responds to a poorly crafted prompt. But if you are purposeful, if you're focused and you know how to query it, then you're going to have really good results. Think of that as you hired a really talented intern. They have little context, but they learn really quickly, but you got to really put an effort into training them. So AI does all of that stuff beautifully. It helps do the research a lot quicker. If there is a particular new topic or technology or anything that's happening out there and you're like, let's figure out this new platform. Let's figure out a new customer base. Let's do a research in those leads, marketing personas. We're far more efficient with creative. Human is always at the end of this pipeline. But when that also knows It's a waste of time to try to come up with a wireframe for a particular use case. And you can, if you word it properly, or if you have particular examples, you attach a screenshot, add a few comments, you have a wireframe. Now you have a base foundation that you can actually put in a beautiful pixel perfect design. Hundreds and hundreds of little practical applications. That's the way we run it in our team. There are bigger and better ways to use it by building basically conventional knowledge or institutional knowledge systems by combining everything coming in from Slack, from your wiki systems such as Confluence. That is also doable. It requires bigger lift. Depending on the scale of an agency and resources they have, you can do pretty much a big impact with AI without, by the way, impacting your workforce, doing nothing but good for them. Because I think the biggest fear is, oh my God, AI will replace me. No, it will just make your life so much better if you know how to use it. It will replace you if you're being lazy at your job and you're not learning how to use AI. But that is not an AI problem, right? So that's to answer your first part of the question. The second part of the question, similar principle. How can we help our clients? You got to understand what their problem is, and something that can be automated basically then you evaluate it through the lens of, can AI be the right solution? Because AI is also, if it's something routine and frequently repeatable operation, it could become expensive, right? Because you're burning a lot of tokens potentially, and you're probably writing a custom automation flow. So it's case by case. It's hard to give everybody one size fits all recommendation, but time and again, I'm saying the same thing. It's not a way of replacing a human, at least not in B2B. There are certain professions, there are certain verticals where AI might start and already is replacing a human worker. But in B2B, it's focusing on the efficiency. It's PDFs or even handwritten notes being parsed. An example that I had several years ago, the invoices were being sent in plain text format in the emails, not even in the form of the attachment, and having to parse that with Python scripts and running the cron jobs and blah, blah, blah. And somebody's business in dozens of millions of dollars really dependent on the ability to parse those invoices and get imported into their ERP. And that was a very fragile system. It's so easy to automate that right now and into mind. So those are the types of efficiencies you can gain through AI. Don't be afraid of AI replacing you in B2B, because one thing is true. It's all about the human relationship and dependability. And AI is not human to offer that to customers of the B2B businesses.
Yeah, to your point, I don't know if you've seen the Motivate platform or heard of the Motivate platform, but they're doing some really cool work there, and with multimodal AI acting as the bridge between the customer and their traditional communication channels and the commerce system, and be able to map POs and even handwritten. I heard a story. I was dealing with a client recently, and the sales rep said to me, he said, "I'm going to show you something." And he shared his screen. He said, "This is an order I received the other day." And his customer had created on his desktop computer a spreadsheet of an order. He didn't know how to attach the spreadsheet to the email, so he literally took a screenshot on his computer of the CSV file. He took a screenshot of it and attached the image of the screenshot to the email and sent it to him and said, "Hey, can you place this order for us?" So this is the kind of thing and they see this all day, every day, from every sector. From, oh, I wrote something on a piece of drywall on a building site. I snapped a photo of it with my phone, and I've sent that through to my account manager. "Hey, can you send this to the job site? I need a pallet of 4x2s or a pallet of drywall or whatever. I need 80,000 freaking nails," or whatever it happens to be. They're not in front of a computer. They're not going to log into a portal on their phone. They're just going to use whatever is to hand and whatever is easiest to them to get an order into their supplier's hands. That's how they're going to do it. And I think you're right. I think multimodal AI starts to bridge this gap, because instead of having to have some sort of complex custom OCR thing that you have to custom build, which was the only way you could do this, now with multimodal AI, it can look at it just as if a human does, and it can map it directly into the commerce system. It can parse it. It can map it to the catalog and say, well, that's the closest SKU match or the closest name match or the closest whatever. And then if not quite enough information is there, then if it can only complete the order to a stage of 80% completeness, then it's only going to notify the account manager if it can't fully process the order. Oh, here's the 20% of the information we're missing. Go and get that only that 20%, complete that order, then we can process it. So I think you're right. I think a lot of B2B businesses are starting to realize we will get automatic adoption of our commerce technology, leading to much higher ROI and leading to a much lower TCO if customers don't have to change their behavior to adopt our technology. And I think those bridge technologies are so important in helping them to meet that goal. What do you think?
I agree with you, but it's going to be interesting what's going to happen with agentic e-commerce. That might become a thing as
Yep.
everything matures. Not just the agents, but the websites will have to be adapted for that kind of behavior. But yes, it's got to be about the human. Again, in B2B, it's about the relationship and a convenience of the people doing the job, whatever their job happens to be. And a lot of times it's your technician or it's your construction project manager. They don't want to be burdened with those things. And you don't want them to be burdened with that. It's because it's their motivation. And we're talking about the efficiency on so many different levels because it could be just almost like an HR motivational thing. You're making my job easy, therefore my retention, my in HR and my staff talent is better. It's a win all around. And then at the end, you're focused on doing what your main mission is. In this case, it could be building houses, delivering some construction product, manufacturing that particular unique part for aerospace. Let people focus on what they were hired for, not the admin stuff, not the minutia. And I think that's the main role of AI in the next couple of years. It doesn't mean that we will not see some other crazy disruption, but I think we should all focus on what is the efficiency and convenience we can bring into the mix rather than be fearful of what may potentially happen.
Couldn't agree more. Listen, an hour has absolutely flown by. It's been a magical discussion. I love speaking with people that are highly intelligent, highly experienced, and highly technical like you about this wonderful world of B2B commerce. Now, as we do come down to the end of our time together, what is the best way for people to get a hold of you? Obviously, they can get a hold of you on LinkedIn. I'll drop a link to your website in the show notes. Other than that, how do you like people to reach out, get in touch with you, have a conversation about B2B, all things commerce, all things digital transformation? What's the best way to find you?
I guess LinkedIn, and my email is D as my first initial, KON, dcon@axis.dev. Hit me up by email or LinkedIn, and I'm happy to help anyone who's seeking advice. And of course, always hit Jason because he knows probably a gazillion things better than I would ever learn. I really appreciate you having me here because, man, you are the authority in the industry, and I love being here.
Oh, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Now I get to flip the script. I get to hand the microphone over to you. I get to let you ask me one question. Any question you like, can be personal or professional. So, Mr. Dmitry Khan, what is your question for me today?
What is your projection for the next couple of years in B2B from perspective of technology, and how do we sell? How do we sell our customers who are extremely hesitant and afraid of adopting technology because they see so much and see ever more? What's going to happen, and how would you sell to them?
Very good question. You may not like this answer, but I don't try to sell the unsellable. So I don't ever try to convince a client of mine that they should consider commerce or digital transformation or some form of automation or even a new back office system or whatever. Life is too short. I've come to that conclusion myself. Life is too short. And if they're on the fence or if they're open to the idea at the very least, and they're really just looking for a little bit of validation and confirmation that, yes, this is the direction the world is going. Yes, here's some stats and some data to back that up. And then they go all in once they get that reassurance that they're headed in the right direction, their brain's in the right place. I have no problem with that. But where someone comes in and I've literally had people jump on a call with me and say, convince me. Convince me why I should do e-commerce. Convince me why we should even think about implementing. We've never done e-commerce before and we seem to be doing okay. So why should I've seen a piece of your content. I've listened to maybe a podcast episode. You say this e-commerce thing for B2B is the latest and greatest, but I don't see it, and oftentimes to be fair, it's the male and pale and stale leaders of these organizations. They're in our demographic and they're struggling to drive their smartphone. And so they come to the meeting and they're going, this business is all about the relationship, and I don't see that changing anytime soon. So why do we need new technology? If that's the kind of attitude that they approach the whole conversation with, I say, wish you all the best. if you can come to that realization on your own and you start getting customers that are asking about this, and in order for them to continue to do business with you, they will require you to sell through digital channels to them to make them more efficient as part of the buying process, then come back and see me. But I'm not in the business of selling the unsellable. That's not my gig. There's enough businesses that have already worked that out for themselves that they need to bring some sort of efficiency to the business for them and their customers in order to be able to grow and scale without just throwing bodies at the whole thing. There's enough businesses that have already come to that realization that when I bump into those odd businesses still that are just totally resistant, and they literally, it's almost like throwing down the gauntlet. Okay, convince me, sell me. That's not what I'm here for. That's not what I'm here to do. That's probably not the answer you were necessarily looking for, but I think it's a fool's errand. It's almost impossible. If someone doesn't want to do something, it's very difficult for them to see their way around that. I'll give them information, and I'll link to the latest Forrester report, for example, that shows that 71% of B2B buyers in the United States now are millennials or Gen Z, so they're digital natives. I'll try to furnish them with credible data and information, but I'm not going to convince them. That's just, and I find that it's just futile to try.
I concur 100%. So let's keep on preaching the word to the masses, so to speak, and let's increase everybody's awareness together. I love your answer.
Are you a B2B or D2C e-commerce merchant? Then head over to greenwoodconsulting.net to learn how we can help you scale your business.